last but not least, certainly last but not least, is Boulder City Council member George Karakehian, and truly his better half, Kristen. Sorry, George. But tonight we honor George as an Imagine Foundation board member emeritus. He tells us he's officially retired as a celebration MC, which I was very, very disappointed to hear, George. But maybe after harassing the governor last year at this event, that's what you have to do. I'm not sure. But we do want to honor George. And George, Ron, Sandy, could you join me on the stage here? George, come on up, buddy. This will only be mildly painful, I think. Yeah, just a little bit. As longtime community leaders, Sandy Bracken and Ron Secrist certainly really require no introduction, but because Sandy and Ron are former foundation board members and also friends, we asked them to comment on this very auspicious occasion. So I'll turn this over to Sandy.
Thank you, Walt. A little hard to know where to begin with George. And we are here to honor him, but this may catch so many of you as first-time attendees of this event by surprise, but when we honor George, we have to do it in a little bit different way. And I'll speak more about that. Well, Walt has mentioned some of the highlights about George, but George was one of the founding board members of the Imagine Foundation. George was here at the beginning in many ways, but he was one of the first board members. Bob Charles brought him to the board. And so George was here when the foundation was created almost 15 years ago. And Bob also mentions, and it's unfortunate that he and his wife Judy can't be here tonight, that Bob wanted to be sure and remind us all that George, at the outset of this board coming together for the Imagine Foundation, challenged the board, quote, get a real issue to support. Well, the board took that challenge and in discussions came up with the idea of the smart homes. And so Bob very definitely attributes the development of the smart homes to George. But not for George challenging the board in that way, the smart homes may not have happened. Okay, that's enough of the serious part. Probably for most of us here, we know George because the board side of George's involvement with the Imagine Foundation is, for most of us, pretty invisible. You don't see that work on a day-to-day basis. It happens behind the scenes. It happens at board meetings. The visible part of George and his connection to this foundation has really been his 8 years of emceeing this event. And I know for those that have been to past celebrations, you know, the joy of having George MC, or the enduring George as MC, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes, joy and having to endure George. But 8 years of being MC of this event. He's retiring from that as well. And so it's with that focus in mind, because that's really the visible part of George to this group, wanted to highlight, and probably for all of us who have experienced this event in the past, we have our own special moments and memories about George as MC during one of the past 8 years. Walt stole my highlight, and that was when the governor was here a couple of years ago. Here, the Imagine suddenly has the opportunity to have Governor Hickenlooper here. With Walt's efforts and others, the governor came as our special guest and a keynote speaker. Well, George took advantage of that, and there was no sense from George of any upsmanship in terms of political clout. I mean, Boulder City Council or governor, they were kind of equal that night. And so George went at it with the governor. Really, toe-to-toe, and it was all in good fun. The governor, fortunately, took it in good fun. He left, I think, with a smile on his face. But more importantly, the governor continued to support more funding for the developmentally and cognitively disabled in this state with additional state funding, and has been a supporter of increased funding during his time as governor, and the benefit to Imagine is very real. So George, you didn't do Imagine again that night, but it was a great evening of fun. There is also a characteristic about George's MC that I'm sure, again, for those of you who have experienced it, you can't forget either. George always ended his time as MC in tears. And these were tears of sincere passion and sincere feeling for Imagine and the people that it serves and the community that it serves. It was real to the core, and there was nothing funny or nothing pretentious about that at all, despite the humor, despite the unpredictability of what George would do on a given event and his emceeing. The result in coming to tears at the end was a significant display of George's passion for this organization over the years. So with that in mind, the three of us, Walt and Ron and I, got together, pooled our funds, and George, you never had this when you came to tears, but here's some Kleenex. Let's give a hand for George Karakehian.
George says, oh great, you got a prepared speech. Okay, so wow, you should have, it was amazing to me, the surprise and the bewilderment a couple of weeks ago when I was asked to say a few words about George Karakehian. Hell, I had no idea he died. So to do this, I had to kind of channel my inner Don Rickles and Rodney Dangerfield. Okay, so you know, there are three types of people. There's the good, there's the bad, there's George. The Supreme Being sure laid one on us with this one. And what's amazing is, he's not an only child. And he's the oldest. So fortunately, his sister Linda is a great straight man, so that family did not have to endure two of these. Now you probably know that George is an Armenian. Very proud of that fact. How many Armenians do we have in the audience? That's what I thought. I think there's about 6 left on Earth. You know, if you let him, George will tell you about what fierce fighters, how brave the Armenian Empire was. That was about the 13th century. Okay, so you know we're really disappointed that George is hanging up his MC duties here. As Sandy said, one of the best parts of this event over the last few years was the wagering that went on as to when's George going to start sobbing, or who's he going to skewer first. And it's hard to say much about George without talking about the lovely Kristen. Can you imagine, and I mean imagine with the little I here, being married to this guy for 40+ years? They say Armenians are fabulous lovers. Well, I just want you to know that Kristen told me that was about the 13th century as well. You know, when George and Kristen got married, they were quite a striking couple. That was in the 70s. But now look at it. Kristen still looks about 22, and George is every bit as 75 at his age. And the daughters, Katie and Jessie, are here tonight. Let's give them a hand. They really deserve this, that hand. Because can you imagine growing up with a dad who would torment you by sneaking out at night, going to your bedroom window and scratching on the screens? Or can you imagine the dad who would jump out of closets when you walked by? Or when you played sports and the referee made a questionable call, Mr. Quiet and meek and reserved George wouldn't embarrass you from the stands, not at all. No. So Kristen, Jessie, and Katie, thank you for the sacrifices on our behalf. We're so glad it's you. So this event is an eventful year for George. It starts an eventful year for George. You know, he used to say that this was his favorite thing because he would spend all the time preparing for this. Well, not only is he giving up his MC duties, but at the end of this year, George has announced that he's going to step down from the Boulder City Council. 6 years on the Boulder City Council. Wow. And what a transformation. In 2009, this guy was an arch conservative, carrying the Tea Party banner. No new taxes under his watch. And now, 6 years later, he's seen the light. He loves those fees. He loves those marijuana taxes. He wants to reduce your carbon footprint. He's going to take over your electricity, probably your cable too. And heck, I think they're having a retreat tonight. I think they're talking about the airlines and the gas stations next. He's for normalizing relations with North Korea. And who can forget what we already mentioned, him yucking it up with our Democratic governor last year on this very stage. George is a kind and fun-loving friend. And as a friend, he's yours for life. He's in it for the full count. You know, the sunny days and the rainy days that life delivers to you. Unless you piss him off, and then you're out. In the words of Glinda and Elphaba, who are the witches in the famous Broadway musical Wicked, George, because I knew you, because we knew you, we've been changed for good. Folks, let's give it up for Imagine's #1 fan, George Karakehian.
Ron and Sandy, thank you very much for those comments. Wonderful. And now I have the serious pleasure of presenting a memento, which is really a collage of pictures that capture some wonderful moments of George interacting on behalf of Imagine. So this is from Imagine staff and board members to you. Thank you very much for all you've contributed.
This will be the first year that I didn't cry. I've made a decision that it's time to start acting my age, and that's what you're going to see tonight. Raleigh, I got to tell you, I'm a little upset that the new governor, who was running for office next year, didn't show up tonight. I thought that I was very gracious to him, and you let him know that I missed him tonight. So, tell him thank you for all the great things that he's done for this organization. And I have to tell you that I talked to him after the event last year, and he told me, he said, this was fun. I had told him initially that in fact that I was going to have a little fun with him, and he said, a little fun is just fine. And that's what we had, and I'm proud that he's our governor, and what he's done for this organization is outstanding. So make sure you tell him thank you. I will say he's the wrong party, but other than that, he's done a great job. I do want to recognize a few folks here who have been very special to me, and I know a lot of you want to stand up, but my little girls, Jessie and Katie, stand up. And my older girl, lovely Kristen. And, you know, everybody knows this that knows us. Without her, I wouldn't be here, so thank you. I didn't prepare anything tonight because I thought it would be more fair to all of you to just, you know, tell you how I feel and what I've experienced here with this organization. People have asked me all tonight, they said, hey, how's it going? How are you doing, George? And I said, you know, I'm living the dream. And I got to tell you all, I'm living the dream here. What a community. What an organization. I consider myself a very, very lucky man to have been involved in this group. In fact, it's one of the best things that I ever did in my whole life was get involved with this group, and it's been sensational. It's easy for me to speak as an MC to 500 people. It was a breeze. But this morning I woke up and I was sick about this. And it's not been easy to make it through this day, to think about coming here and talking to you and hearing some people say nice things about me. But I was very lucky to have Bob Charles come and see me. I think it was 15 years ago now, I don't know what it was. And he said, I have to tell you all, he came up and he said, I have to tell you that there's something that I need your help with that'll be one of the best things you ever did in your whole life. And I went, okay, let's hear about it. And he told me about it. And I said, well, I'll be glad to help you. As many of you know, it's very, very difficult to turn down Bob. And I didn't. And when I found out what this organization does in this community, it was unbelievable. And it was very easy to spend time helping raise money for this group and seeing the work that it did in all of our communities. And our biggest chore was telling people what we did in our community, because everybody took it for granted. And then the board decided to change the name to Imagine. And our biggest chore was to go around this community and tell people what Imagine is and who they are, and identify developmental disabilities with Imagine. And we were successful, and it was so easy. And a number of people tonight have come up to me, including Gail Boonstra, thank you, who in fact have said, I want to get involved in this board. And I said to them, it'll be the best thing that you ever did in your life. And I believe that still. So Gail, thank you very much for getting involved. Today alone, I walked into the bank and a young lady walked up to me and said, I heard you're being honored tonight at Imagine. And I want to tell you what Imagine's done for my child. At the bank, that happened today. 2 times today, I've had people come up to me and say, I saw that you're being honored, and I want to tell you what that organization has done for our family. And we still have 200 people on a waiting list for services. And you know why they're on the waiting list? They're on the waiting list because we don't have enough money to provide services to them. And there's something wrong with that. We are a community. We are a great community. And many of us have done very, very well. But we have 200 people who we haven't served yet. So you all need to think about that as the evening goes on. This will probably be my last time up here with this group. But I got to tell you, it's not going to be the last time that I'm involved with this group. This is an amazing organization. Tonight, when I came in, 2 people came up to me and told me about what's happened with them and their children. And Susie Lavelle came up to me a little bit earlier. How does this come out? Susie, I asked her permission if I could do this. And would you tell the people your story, please?
Our grandson is 9 years old today, and when he was 2 and a half, he couldn't speak. Nothing came from him. And he was evaluated, and they said, yes, he should be able to have speech therapy. Well, they sent us a miracle worker. As it turned out, I didn't know it. She was from Imagine. By the time he was 3, she had worked with him. It wasn't just speech, it was sensory, it was everything. I was sure he was autistic. And they worked with him, playing with messy stuff. And at the age of 3, they said he's up to normal. He was speaking full sentences, telling us everything he liked and didn't like. And they have helped him with hints of how to live today. And he's now a 3rd grader, getting straight A's in a private school. And it's because of Imagine. So.
As I said this evening, I didn't really have anything said to say, but that's what happens with this group. And the people affected by this organization and this community, it just goes so deep. And we are so lucky because not all cities and not all areas have Imagine. And it's been amazing. It's been an amazing run for me. We've raised, in our 13 or 14 years, I think $6 million now, thanks to all of you. Maybe a little more tonight if you're hearing my message. And I want to thank you all for selling out this event and for helping Imagine. And I love you all. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, George.